Darling, you have just begun. By Dancing Lassie. Chapter 16. Ciri's birthday, at her insistence, passes with little fanfare. It's too weird, she insists, when Geralt tries to convince her that while he, Vesemir, Eskel, and Cohen, who happen to be passing through Cadwyn and decided to pop in, might not be the best party planners, they can manage some kind of celebration for her. Everyone I used to celebrate with is dead, she tells him bluntly. No matter how hard you tried, all I would be able to think about is how it's so different from last year. I don't want that. I just want to train as usual and beat Eskel at cards. That doesn't stop them from subtly serving Ciri's favorite dinner, but no one comments on it, and they get away with their small acknowledgments of her special day. The day after is harder. It's the day she would normally spend with Jaskier. Geralt had agonized for weeks over what to do. Should he make a big deal of it? Get the other witches involved? Ignore and not draw attention to Jaskier's absence? In the end, he decides to leave the other witchers out of it, but informs them sternly, while he swats their hands away from the food he is packing, that neither he nor Ciri will be training that day. He's decided to take her out of the keep and further up the mountain, where the views are stunning. It's here that he unveils the picnic he's packed, and they dig into it with relish, while Ciri badgers Geralt to tell her about the flora and fauna around them. Neither mentions Jaskier, scared that drawing attention to his absence will shatter the light-hearted atmosphere. Nonetheless, Geralt is mentally counting down the days until he can see his river god again. He suspects Jaskier may come bounding into the keep the following day, but reminds himself that Jaskier may very well have chosen to spend one last night in Lettenhove before coming north. It's more worrying when he doesn't appear the day after that, or the day after that, or the one following. He tries to hide his agitation, well aware that Ciri is already on edge. It's not until a week after Ciri's birthday that Jaskier's slow-moving figure is spotted heading from the river up toward the keep. Ciri drops her sword with a clang when Vesemir informs them of this and goes sprinting down to the river, Geralt close behind her. They crash into Jaskier, and it's only Geralt's balance and strength that prevents them all from going tumbling down the hill and into the water. He crushes the two most important people in the world to his chest, nose pressed firmly in Jaskier's hair. He thinks the bar may be trembling. "You're late!" Ciri accuses, voice muffled by Jaskier's shirt. "I know," the river god exhales shakily. "I'm sorry, there was some trouble back in Lettenhove." "Ike?" Ciri questions fearfully, pulling away slightly so she can look up at her papa. "Mousak?" "Mousak is fine," Jaskier assures. "Ike..." He hesitates briefly. "Ike is very upset." "What happened?" Geralt asks gruffly, reluctantly letting Jaskier go and taking his bag from him, swinging it over his own shoulder so they can head back up to the keep. "Squeak died." Ciri falters, tears welling in her eyes. "Squeak? What happened?" Jaskier's mouth is a grim line. "Ike was very, he stresses, briefly kidnapped. Squeak tried to defend the master, but..." Ciri has stopped mouth trembling. "Why was he kidnapped? That's because of me, isn't it?" "No!" Jaskier barks, crouching down in front of her and pulling her into a hug. "Because of Nilfgaard, not because of you. You've done nothing wrong." "But Nilfgaard are after me! If Ike didn't know me, he wouldn't have been kidnapped." "Ike adores you," Jaskier insists. "His life is 100, no, 1,000 times better for having you in it. None of us would be without you, Ciri. Nilfgaard will pay for the pain they're causing, but always remember it's pain they are causing, not you. Never you. You are not responsible for their wickedness." Ciri sniffs and wraps her arms around Jaskier's neck. He picks her up and tries not to show that he's struggling a little as he starts walking again. Ciri has grown taller since he left and put on muscle as well. Geralt hides his smile. Ciri stays near Jaskier for the rest of the day, almost always within an arm's reach. It's not until much later, after Ciri has gone to bed and Geralt has ushered Jaskier into their own room, that they have a moment alone together. Jaskier immediately sags into Geralt's arms in exhaustion, and Geralt has to carry him to the bed, kneeling down to pry off Jaskier's boots as the river god lies limply on top of the covers. "You didn't tell Ciri everything," he observes, pulling back the covers and rolling Jaskier beneath them. He slides in next to his lover and curls up close to him, reveling in the familiar warmth he's missed so much. "At dinner, when you were telling her what you've been up to since you left, you didn't tell her everything." "No, there are some things she doesn't need to know yet. But I do. and Geralt's tone breaks no argument. Yes, Jaskier sighs, breath tickling Geralt's neck. I suppose you do. There was a brief moment of silence that Geralt allows, letting Jaskier organize his thoughts. Also, Yennefer. Geralt goes rigid, mind whirling in a dozen different directions. He simultaneously wants to rip the covers off Jaskier and see for himself that the bard is unharmed, while also resisting asking how she was. He's bound her to him with a wish he had stupidly concealed from her, and part of him would always feel responsible for her because of that, no matter how much frostiness any mention of the sorceress might impose on his current relationship. She helped me save Ike, the second time I saw her. The second time. Geralt holds Jaskier close, unsure of what else to do when discussing such a contentious topic. We ran into each other at an inn on my way down south. I think that as long as we are bound together by your wish, I'm fated to run into her until one of us dies. Guilt, that oh-so-familiar feeling, gnaws at Geralt's heart. I'm sorry. He apologizes for the 100th time, likely just the first of 100 more. Hush, Jaskier chides, pressing a kiss to his chin. I don't blame you for trying to save us when you didn't know any better. If anything, talking to her made me realize that. And she may prove useful in the future, especially as Nilfgaard. Only, let's agree now that we keep Ciri away from her. I don't want our daughter spending time with my attempted murderer. Thank Melatelli, it's Triss that Eskel's contacted. All right, he agrees softly, ducking his head to press a kiss to Jaskier's willing lips. The bard burrows closer to him. You're still upset, he notes. Jaskier nods. Mama won't help. She's gone back to Cintra and is living peacefully among the Nilfgaardians. She wants us all to remain neutral. Let the countries fight it out amongst themselves and stay out of it. It had previously crossed Geralt's mind that the river gods might take such a stance, especially once he learnt about Jaskier's predecessor. He had, however, held out some small hope that Jaskier might convince his family to side with them. It wasn't ever a lot of hope. If the river gods made a habit of getting involved in political affairs, they'd be a lot easier to discover and not just a dubious paragraph in a dusty old book. Still, he could tell Jaskier was crushed by his mother's insistence on neutrality. The river god sniffed, wiping his nose against Geralt's shirt. Ina said something to me before I left. Well, didn't say exactly. More like shouted it through my door. Jaskier admits. She said I couldn't blame Mama for not taking sides, when witches are famously neutral. Geralt lets out an agitated breath. It depends on the school. Vipers and cats tend to get involved more than we think is wise, but wolves have always remained neutral. Tear-filled eyes peer up at him. Then why did we bring Ciri here? What was the point? The point. Geralt wipes a thumb under Jaskier's eyes, brushing away the tears. Was to give her the skills she needs, so no matter what she decides to do in the future, she isn't denied any options. If she wants to hide away from Nilfgaard for the rest of her life and settle down in a little town somewhere and live a quiet life, then she can. But if she wants to take back Cintra and rule as queen, then she'll be able to do that as well. If she wants to hunt monsters, well, we have time to talk her out of it. Jaskier gives a watery laugh and surges upwards to kiss Geralt. They hold each other close until they drift into sleep, and Geralt sleepily decides that he'll wait a couple of days before explaining about Ciri's latest episode and the need for Triss to visit, just to give Jaskier the chance to calm down and relax. Jaskier thinks he takes it very well. He'd been rather suspicious when Geralt left Ciri training alone with Eskel and Cohen, so the Witcher could come and have a quiet, intimate lunch with him. His suspicions had not been baseless, but Jaskier thinks he handled it with dignity and maturity. When Geralt had haltingly explained why Ciri needed a mage's help, and that the sorceress was probably already on her way to Garmorin, Jaskier had simply nodded and fled. He'd deny any accusations his siblings would have thrown at him that he behaved irrationally. They were always telling him to take a moment to consider things from other people's point of view, to look at the logic of any decision. He was doing just that. He hadn't shouted, he hadn't cried, he hadn't hurled the soup into Geralt's face. He had very calmly and rationally run away and hidden in a dark, quiet corner of the library to panic quietly by himself while he got his head around the unexpected news Geralt had sprung on him. He desperately wishes he'd brought Massac with him, but the druid has never had a great affinity for portals, and Jaskier can't transport his friend his way. The truth is, Massac can't be away from Lettenhove for the amount of time it'd take him to get to Garmorin, examine and help Ciri, and then return home. Kate, Ike, and the children need him. Jaskier needs him in Lettenhove, keeping everyone safe. The druid had understood this. They'd talked about it quietly together late in the evening, once everyone else was in bed, during that extra week Jaskier had ended up spending in Lettenhove. They'd stayed up late into the night discussing safeguards and plans for various potential scenarios. Jaskier had finally been able to question the druid on the ease of which his dead brother could take him over these days. Malzak's best theory is that having had the way shown to him by whatever entity had possessed Ciri, Pankratz now knows the path between Jaskier's subconscious and his conscious self. The more he travels it, the easier it is for him to push his way to the surface. But the good news is, Pankratz seems to find it hard to take over unless Jaskier is in a state of heightened emotion, which is why he has to remain calm and not think upsetting thoughts about sorceresses and iron shackles and, oh God, poor Ike! His acolyte hadn't seemed to blame Jaskier for his ordeal, was grateful for the quick rescue. But a light in Ike's eyes that had been present since the moment Jaskier accepted the former knight as his acolyte had dimmed. Squeak's death hit him hard, as they'd all expected. He had tearfully requested Jaskier's permission to make Squeak a little boat that they'd fill with kindling and set alight as it floated with Squeak down the river. Jaskier hadn't even considered refusing him. He'd stood on his pier with the entire mournful household, hand resting comfortingly on his first acolyte's shoulder as they'd watched the little boat burn and sink below the water, laying Squeak to rest. Jaskier would swear until his dying day that as the boat sank, he could hear Squeak's distinctive, high-pitched bark echo through his mind and feel the pitter-patter of tiny feet scrabbling over his soul. The river god chokes back a sob, trying to stifle all sound when he hears the library door open. He doesn't want to talk to Geralt just yet. He wants to pull himself together first, to show his Witcher that he understands the difficult decision he had to make in Jaskier's absence, but fear still threatens to overwhelm him. He buries his head in his knees and just prays that whoever it is will go away. No such luck. The footsteps stop right before him, and a heavy weight lands on the floor next to him, knees brushing against his own. Geralt's panicking, Eskel tells him, leaning against the wall next to him. He somehow got it into his head that you've run off back to Lettenhove, and he's gone straight down to the river to try and get Gwen to stop you. Not leaving, Jaskier mumbles into his knees. Just need a moment. I'll be fine. Yeah? Eskel doesn't sound like he believes him. That why you're curled up in the dust and won't even look at me? Jaskier raises his head to glare, which is a mistake, as it shows off his red-rimmed eyes and pale cheeks. Shit! Eskel looks him up and down. Geralt wasn't exaggerating. That sorceress really messed you up. Fuck off! Jaskier snaps. Nope, can't do that. If I leave, you'll just find yourself in an even more miserable hiding place. Then the dark thoughts will really start creeping in. Trust me, I've been there. I'm going to stay right here until you're ready to face the world again. Why? As Jaskier moans, slumping further down the wall. You don't even like me. Nonsense, Eskel tells him briskly. You're okay. You spent months glaring at me whenever you saw me. Jaskier points out. That was just until I established that my brother wasn't under your spell. Finally figured that out. Jaskier huffs, wiping his wet eyes with his sleeve. Oh, he's definitely under your spell, but it appears to be completely natural and not some river god mind trick. Even when you were hundreds of miles away, he was still completely besotted, which only goes to show my brother looks particularly stupid when in love. He does not! He looks very handsome. Jaskier feels the need to defend his Witcher from some slander. Of course he's not the only one. Didn't notice until you started hanging out with Lambert and I could see the difference, but you look totally love-struck when you see Geralt as well. The two of you look at each other like idiots, making kissy faces at each other across the dinner table. You're disgusting, the pair of you. I do not make kissy faces at him over dinner, Jaskier objects. You do. And in the baths, and across the training yard. The entire keep stinks of your love for one another. You're lucky I like Ciri, or I would have insisted you were both chucked out back into the wild long ago. Eskel nudges Jaskier's foot with his own. Feeling a bit better? He inquires. The river god considers this, letting out a shaky breath and running a grubby hand through his already tousled hair. A bit, he admits. You do know I was the one who called for Triss. Eskel checks. Geralt didn't try and shoulder that decision like the noble brute he is. No, he explained everything. I know why we need to get a mage up here, it's just... Drama's a bitch, Eskel sympathizes. And you can't convince yourself you'll find 1,000 times, but it'll still rear its ugly head and bite you when you least expect it. Geralt explained about what that Yennefer woman did to you. Triss isn't like that. She's helped several of us witches when we've bumped into her on the path. She'll behave.
And if she doesn't, I'll escort her out of the gate myself."
He winks at the bemused river god.
"She won't want that. She'll be the first mage here since the siege of Cammorin. She'll be dying to stay and poke around. Mages never can resist the lure of forgotten magical secrets."
"My noble hero," Yasker quips dryly, rising unsteadily to his feet. Eskel gets up with much more grace and slaps Yasker on the back the way the river god has seen him do with his brothers.
"Ready to put Geralt out of his misery?"
I suppose I'd better, before he gets it into his head to ride south in search of me."
Yasker allows himself to be herded from the room, cheered if nothing else by the knowledge that Eskel finally seems to have warmed to him.